What is the center of your life? It is a biological fact, a universal reality that everything has a center. Everything has an organizing principle around which it moves. So, what's yours? What is your organizing center around which your entire life revolves? This is the Independence Podcast. I am your host, Bryan Dunham. Welcome to the very first bonus episode that I am titling Reordering the Orbit. I have been preparing for a sermon I'm going to be giving in a couple of weeks, and I've been marinating in a verse, 1 Peter, actually chapter 4, verse 7. And this particular topic, the organizing center of life, has been weighing on me. I've been thinking about it for some time now, a few weeks. And this particular verse yesterday got me really thinking about it as I was digging into the Greek for this verse. But the topic itself, I think, is of primary importance for our lives and how we live them, because you and I, we all have something that's at the center. Even if you don't know it immediately, if I said, what's at the center of your life? You might say, well, there's a lot of things at the center, right? My family, my job, my, whatever. There's all kinds of things that you could place at the center of your life. But really, truly, there is only one thing. Like when you really have to start making decisions around what's the most important thing, there is one thing that is above and beyond all things around which your entire life revolves. And the reason this is so important is because if that thing that's at the center can't support your entire life, all of the things you have going on, eventually it's going to break down. And when it does break down, chaos will ensue. Like this again is a biological fact. Like the universe itself operates on the principle of centers holding systems together, from atoms like nuclei to galaxies. Black holes are massive stars at the center. And when the center collapses, chaos erupts. Disintegration happens when the organizing center fails. If the sun's gravity, like in our solar system, if the sun's gravity suddenly vanished, the planets would spiral out of orbit into all these disordered trajectories. And so what is it that is holding center in your life? When I think back around my own life, there's been a number of things that I have tried to place at the center. First one was really just me, my success, my career, beginning as a police officer, moving into financial services, right? That was the center of my life. Like whatever my goal was in my career, and that would change. While the goals changed, the career was always at the center. And at some point, when you start to realize your career goals, you figure out that this thing that you've been building your entire life around isn't really the thing. It isn't answering some of the questions that you thought it would answer. Isn't filling up your soul and keeping it full in ways that you thought it would. Because we have those things. Like in this sense, I'm using career, but we all have those things that we think, well, when I get this, or when I obtain that, or when this happens in my life, then that'll be it. I'll be truly fulfilled, and I won't need anything else, or whatever language you put to that. We all have those things that we pursue and we place at the center. And when I say place at the center, again, you may think in your mind, well, there's a lot of things that have a priority in my life. But really, if you had to decide, if you said, okay, well, it's going to be career or family, and you may say, okay, well, then it's going to be my family. All right, well, so when decisions come down the line about what's best for your family or best for your career, what decision are you actually making? Because sometimes we can have in our head that this thing is at the center. That's not really at the center. It's like the idealized version of me, like the good version of me, the best version of me would say my family is at the center. But in reality, I'm making choices that would indicate otherwise, that would indicate my career is actually at the center of my life, that my life is revolving around the idea of my growth there. And saw that certainly in my own life. A good diagnostic for you would just be to look at your calendar and look at your bank account. Like whatever you in your mind you say these things are the most important. Well, where do you spend most of your time and where do you spend your money? And those two things are going to clarify for you, I think, pretty quickly what actually is at the center of your life and what your life is revolving around. There was a period of time when cycling was the center of my definitely the center of my life. Now at that time in my life, I would not have said that. Like if you said, "Hey, what's the organizing principle of your life? What is the center around which your life revolves?" I wouldn't have said cycling because even saying that now sounds ridiculous. How could you make something like that the organizing principle of your life when you are married, when you have kids, when you have a job, when you have responsibilities at church? But I'll tell you, in looking back on it, I would get up every morning at 3:30. The first thing I did is I reached over and I grabbed the pulse ox and I put it on my finger. And I would note what was my waking heart rate and what was my oxygen saturation. And I kept track of that every day. The purpose for tracking that was to see how hard I needed to push my body that morning. If my heart rate was running relatively higher than it has been, then I know that I can't really push myself too hard and expect to recover. Then I would roll out of bed at 3:30. I would immediately go out to the garage where I had a Bluetooth trainer that was attached to my bicycle and attached to my computer that would drive it. And I had a full-blown training plan set up. I spent money to subscribe to this. I would get on the bike and I would ride it for an hour and a half to 2 hours every single morning. I would get off the bike. I would immediately go in and make a particular type of smoothie to replenish my body. I would go shower and then I would go to work. I would weigh my food, everything I ate. I weighed. I was very careful about what nutrients I took in. And all of this was for cycling performance, right? And then at lunch, I would go down to the gym at work and I would do stretches, all kinds of things that would be some core work, things that were particular to the idea of cycling. And then I would come home at night. Yes, I spent time with family. I did my job at work, but when I came home at night, it was the priority was rest, recuperation, and getting enough sleep because tomorrow I'm getting up again at 3:30 in the morning. And I was doing races and particular training. Like some guys would call up and say, "Hey, you want to go for a ride?" And there really was only one guy I would ride with. His name was Josh because Josh and I were kind of the same mindset in some ways when we got on the bike. And I could always count on Josh to push me and I would push him. And it was not going to be a pleasure cruise. We were going out for real training and he and I would do some races together. And so the organizing principle of my life, the time I got up, the time I went to bed, what I was eating, how I thought about my life, always one of the very first questions I asked was, how is this going to impact what I'm training for on the bike? And so while again, I would not have admitted with my mouth that cycling was the organizing principle of my life, my actions and the things that I did with complete and full consideration of what that meant for my racing. And so it was the organizing principle of my life. And I think for a lot of us, just to take the time to sit down and ask yourself that question, like, what is at the center? What am I spending my time on? What am I like actually, what am I do? What am I doing here? Because we fool ourselves. We all have this idealized version of us, I think, in our own minds, like of who we think we are and like what that person does or should or would do in a particular situation. But when we really analyze our actions and what it is that we're doing, we might come up with a different answer. Like the evidence might prove us wrong in a court of law if we were to do that. So it's important that we take the time to analyze what really is at the core of your life. Because if that thing cannot actually be the organizing principle of your life, if it can't support the weight that the organizing principle of your life has to support to keep it all running, to keep it all in orbit around the center, it will eventually break down. And when it does eventually break down, chaos ensues, disintegration happens, and life feels like it is falling apart. And I think as humans, if you've lived long enough, you have had this experience where this thing that, whether it might have been a relationship that you had invested all, so much time in. Remember when you first kind of meet someone and you have this infatuation with them, and it really takes over. It's intoxicating in a lot of ways. It takes over your mind. It takes over, like, this is the person that you're thinking about. You're wondering what they're doing. You're communicating with them a lot. And it, like, your thoughts just tend that direction. You put this person at the center, and if that begins to sprout and a real relationship forms, and you begin to organize your life around this individual, it's easier to see maybe that way. I think all of us have done that, and there's almost a pull, like a gravitational pull, um, which only would make sense in the course of this conversation, that there would be some gravity to the thing you put at the center that draws you towards it. But these are things that again, at the end of the day, can't really support the thing at the center. And I think it's interesting that we all have something. Like, we all have something we put at the center. It's an inescapable fact. There's something that's at the center of your life. And we're all drawn to put things there. We're all drawn to have something in that spot. And the reason that we're drawn to that is because something is supposed to go in that spot. And that something, I'll make the argument later, is God. But back to the original part of what I was saying, I've been preparing for a message coming up, and I've gotten hung up on some Greek words in 1 Peter 4, verse 7. And just to read that verse to you is, the end of all things is at hand. This is the ESV version, by the way, English Standard Version. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. And the first Greek word here, and the only one I'm going to focus on for this particular podcast, is self-controlled. This is the Greek word sophroneo, and it's a combination of two Greek words. But when these words are combined, sophroneo means of sound mind, like in your right mind, sane, so to speak. This word gets used when Jesus goes across the lake to the area of the Gerasenes, and there is the demoniac, is what it's called, this man that's possessed, that's running around in the tombs out there, and Jesus encounters him and heals him. And the people are amazed because they come out and they see this person who has been a wild, crazy man all the time they've ever known him, out of his mind, literally out of his mind, sitting in his right mind. That's the Greek word sophroneo. So it's like this concept of, having now a restored rationality under Christ's headship. That's what this word sophroneo means. And that's what Peter is talking about here. And the Greek word there, sophroneo, is a combination of two Greek words, soos, which means safe or sound, and then phren, which is, you and I get the English word diaphragm from this Greek word phren. Phren means essentially what regulates life. If you think about your diaphragm being the thing that regulates your breathing, and when you get real excited, what happens? A lot of times we start breathing really heavy. Or when somebody is going through an intense moment, what's one thing that you typically will go to someone and say? Just breathe. Just breathe. There was a time I was having a panic attack, and I actually thought I was having a heart attack. And it was so bad, my hands were going numb. I actually called 911. I was driving a car and I pulled over. I thought, I'm about to pass out. Something's going on here. I'm having a heart attack or stroke or something. And I called 911. They sent an ambulance out. But while I was talking to the person on the other end, the dispatcher, she said, all right, I just want you to breathe with me. We need to slow your breathing down. And she was like counting out breaths with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And as she was working with me, I began to calm down just in that moment. And that's what we do. It's like, hey, just breathe. Just slow down. So, like, we understand that the breath is psychosomatic. Like, a lot of meditation is breath work, because this helps our bodies to, to lower the excitement level that we might be experiencing at the time. So this Greek word of sound mind means, you know, again, I mentioned it earlier, that kind of the restoration of rationality. To be in your right mind in this sense is to be not on either extreme, right? It's very easy to see this in our political environment right now. Very easy to line up under either the right or under the left. And like when it comes to believers, when it comes to Christians, like we have a king, and we have a kingdom, and it has nothing to do with any of the things going on around here. And so for us to not be in our right mind, so to speak, or like to go completely to one extreme, whether that is the hard right or to go to the other extreme, which is the hard left, is not where a Christian should be. Like it is this concept of being able to balance out, like having this God-controlled perspective. So even in your thinking, in your political thinking, think about what is the organizing principle of your political thought life, because there is one. What is it? And if it is not that God-controlled perspective that pulls the truth from this side and this side, and understands that there is a perspective that God brings to the table. And as Christians, our goal is to put that thinking at the center. Like when it comes to this concept of political thought, is to put like the Jesus thought at the center, which is not going to fall on either extreme. That's just how it is. And when you look at things that are happening in the world right now, as Christians, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to over associate with one side versus another. And we have to be in our right mind about that. We have to be at the true center, which is placing Christ at the center of those thought processes, right? That the old adage of what would Jesus do? It's a cliche now, but the reality of allowing him to control our thought process is more critical right now than it's ever been in my lifetime. And I'm 52. So this concept of the organizing principle, you can see it in the little different facets of your life. Like in just the political one is just an obvious one right now. And so I'm sharing this to share with you that humans, so we are created in the image of God, and we require a center for order. You might say we require a spiritual center. Like, what is your spiritual center? I would argue that is the center. I used to think of my life in terms of my spiritual life, and then as though that were somehow different from other parts of my life. I've integrated those things now, whereas everything is spiritual. Everything in my life has a spiritual aspect to it, and impacts my spirit. And so when I think about the center of my life, that in and of itself is spiritual in essence. Like what my life truly revolves around is spiritual in essence. And being created in the image of God, we need that moral and relational nucleus, and that is God. Putting God as the organizing center of your life is where we should be as Christians. And my argument would be all of humans are built for this, to have God at the center. We try to place other things at the center all the time. And when we do that, and sometimes it's unintentional. Like you can look around your life and go, wow, how did it get like this? How did my life get wrapped around this particular thing? Because something will be at the center. You can't fight that. Something will be at the center. Sometimes you intentionally do it. Sometimes you unintentionally do it. Sometimes it's a byproduct of other things that you're doing. But you can wake up one day and say, how did this happen? how did I get to be this person? And it's because something will have that gravitational pull in your life. And it's the wise one would sit back and analyze, okay, what is that now? And what do I want it to be? And to be very intentional about what you're placing at the center of your life. And that, my argument is that thing has to be God, or eventually it will break down. God is the only thing that can hold the expectations, that has the power to hold all of those things in your life that are revolving around it in tension. In tension, I realized I used the word intention a little bit, meaning like your intent, versus that idea of like things that appear to be opposites that are pulling on each other, like opposite poles that create a tension between them. Like God is the only thing that's powerful enough to hold all the aspects of your life that are revolving around it properly, and not let them disintegrate and not let them fall apart at some point. And when God is displaced from the center, chaos will ensue in your values, in your relationships, and in your purpose, in your interior purpose. You will look around and not know what you're really living for. And the last podcast I did called "Is This It?" That is one of those questions that will erupt in your soul when your organizing principle is off. That it is a telltale sign that something's at the center that shouldn't be there. Romans 1 describes like this concept of like not making God, like not putting God at the center. And when that happens, man exchanges the glory of God for other things, meaning that part of Romans 1 is Paul just saying when God is displaced from the center, what you start to see is disorder, confusion, and decay in society. And I think that you'd be hard pressed to look around our world and say you don't see those things, Christian or not. You can look around the world and say, gosh, things seem to be falling apart at record levels. And this is the byproduct of not having God at the center of individual lives, of corporate lives, even of some churches. Sometimes God is not the organizing principle of a church. And even though we might say it is, when we look around again at time and calendar and other things, you might realize that something else is at the center. And not, again, those are things that are done unintentionally. And the same thing happens in our individual lives. So what is at the center? What is the organizing principle of your life? And if that thing is not God, that is going to create an issue for you in the long run. There's a verse in Colossians. So this is Colossians chapter 1, and this is speaking of God, specifically the preeminence of Christ. And it says, this is verse 16 and 17 of chapter 1, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. In him all things hold together. He is the organizing principle of it all, my friends. And he has to be the organizing principle of your life. If you're not, he has to be the organizing principle of your life if it's all going to continue to hold together. So take the time, think through, look at your bank account, look at your calendar, start asking yourself the question. Just ask the question. What's the organizing principle of my life? And is that thing going to be enough to hold it all together? Thanks for listening. Grace and peace, my friends.